All right, today we're going to get into a really fascinating story of unintended consequences right from the American heartland. It's all about this hidden ocean of water, a huge technological breakthrough, and get this, how having more of something precious actually made things more risky. It's a real paradox. So let's get into it.
So, if you've ever been on a plane, looking out the window over the middle of the country, you've probably seen this. It's pretty striking, right? This patchwork of these perfect green circles just stretching out for miles. Well, what you're looking at is something called center pivot irrigation, and it totally changed American farming. But these circles, they're also a clue, a starting point for a way bigger story.
Yeah, because that is the central question we're digging into here. How on earth did this incredible technology, something literally designed to beat drought, end up creating this billion-dollar paradox? How did it make farmers even more vulnerable to the exact thing they were trying to escape? It just doesn't seem to make sense, right? Okay, to figure that out, we have to start at the beginning. We need to introduce the main character in this whole drama, the water itself. And it's not just any water source, it's this massive ancient aquifer. So here it is, the Ogallala Aquifer. And look, this thing is just enormous. We're talking about an area that stretches under parts of 8 different states, all the way from South Dakota down to Texas. It is one of the biggest underground freshwater sources on the entire planet. And for a long, long time, it was basically American farming's secret weapon. But here's the absolute key thing you have to understand. It's what's called fossil water. Now, this isn't like a lake or a river that gets refilled by rain every year. Nope. The Ogallala got filled up by ancient runoff, like millions of years ago. So it's a non-renewable resource. Once you take that water out, for all practical purposes, it's gone for good. It just recharges so slowly. And for the longest time, all that water was just tantalizingly out of reach. People knew it was down there. I mean, this quote from way back in 1928 really shows you how frustrating it was. You have this huge supply of water, but no good way to get it up to the surface. It was exactly like having $1 billion sitting in a vault, but you just don't have the key.
Well, then came the key. Technology finally figured it out. After World War II, you get these really powerful pumps, a lot of them adapted from old car engines, and then the big one. In 1952, a farmer named Frank Seibach gets his patent for the center pivot irrigation system. Yep, those giant sprinklers that make the green circles. By the 1960s and 70s, this stuff was just everywhere.
And the change was, well, it was just incredible. Look at this. On the left, you see irrigated land back in 1935. It's just a couple of little spots here and there. But then you jump forward to 1974 on the right, and wow, huge areas of the plains right on top of the aquifer are now covered in irrigation. That hidden ocean, it was finally unlocked. And at first, it was nothing short of a miracle. It really seemed like the perfect silver bullet solution to the single biggest problem farmers had in this part of the country, that constant threat of drought. I mean, just think about it for a second. All of a sudden, you're not at the mercy of the weather anymore. You have a steady, reliable supply of water whenever you need it. It really was the ultimate insurance policy. If the rain didn't come, you just turned on the pumps. Your crop yields, they became stable, predictable, secure. Now, there's an economics term for this first phase. It's called adjusting on the intensive margin. But really, it's a super simple idea. It just means farmers didn't change what they were growing. They just changed how they grew it. They took the same fields of wheat and corn they'd always had, and they just added a whole lot of water. It made everything more productive and way more secure. And you can see this so clearly in the data. Between 1950 and 1964, the total acreage for corn and wheat, it pretty much stayed the same. But the amount of irrigated land for those exact same crops, whoosh, it shot way up. So here's the key takeaway for this part. They were just making their existing bets safer. They weren't making brand new ones. Yet.
But this is where the story takes a big turn. That short-run miracle, it had the seeds of a long-run disaster hidden inside it. The solution itself started to create a whole new kind of risk.
See, once that insurance policy of irrigation started to feel like a sure thing, like it would be there forever, well, farmers did what any smart business person would do. They adapted. They started making much bigger, much bolder bets, all based on the idea that the water would never run out. Their entire business model began to shift. And that brings us to the second phase, which economists call adjusting on the extensive margin. So instead of just watering the crops they already had, they started to completely change what they were planting. They moved away from the tough, drought-resistant plants and went all in on crops that were way thirstier, but hey, they were also way more profitable. We're talking mostly about corn. And right here, this lays out the whole paradox perfectly. In the short run, adding water made their existing farms safer, no doubt about it. But in the long run, by completely changing their crops to depend on that water, their whole operation became riskier. Their success was now 100% tied to having that irrigation, always. That safety net, it wasn't a net anymore. It was a high wire act. So this massive shift in farming, it didn't just change what was growing in the fields. It kicked off this huge economic roller coaster, a massive boom followed by this kind of slow motion bust. And you could see it all play out in the price of the farmland itself. Okay, so here's how that worked. The dirt itself, the land, wasn't really the valuable part. It was the water under the dirt. All the money that farmers expected to make in the future from that cheap, easy water, it got baked in, you could say, directly into the price of the land. There's a fancy word for it. It's called capitalization. And get this, at the absolute peak, back in 1974, the estimated value of just the Ogallala's water was a mind-blowing $26 billion. Just think about that. That's not the value of the land or the crops. That's the price tag on the water alone, all wrapped up in the price of the farms on top of it. What a boom. But then you fast forward to 2002, and that number has crashed all the way down to just $9 billion. That's a drop of almost 2/3 in less than 30 years. So what on earth happened? Well, it wasn't because the water was suddenly less useful. In fact, it was more critical than ever. No, the value dropped because the market, the people buying and selling this land, finally woke up to the reality of the situation. They realized, wait a minute, this is fossil water. It's a limited supply, and they were draining it way, way faster than nature could ever replace it. That whole boom was built on an asset that was literally disappearing. So after all that, what are the big lessons here? What can we take away from this whole story of technology, water, and unintended consequences? Well, there are a few really important takeaways. Okay, first and foremost, a really slick technological fix for one problem can end up creating brand new ones you never saw coming, right? In the short run, irrigation was fantastic for fighting drought. But in the long run, the way farmers adapted to it by switching to those super thirsty crops actually made the entire agricultural system more fragile, more sensitive to drought. Having so much water just encouraged dependency and risk. And what's really interesting is that the research shows that neighboring farms that didn't have access to the aquifer had to stick with the old-school drought-resistant farming. And guess what? Over the long haul, their way of farming was actually more resilient. So in the end, the story of the Ogallala really is so much more than a story about water. It's this incredible, powerful case study in how we deal with resources and technology. And it really leaves us with this huge, critical question that we ought to ask about any major new innovation. Sure, it can solve our problems today, but what new problems is it creating for tomorrow?